The sun is barely up, and the harvest is already calling. In ancient China, every hour lost in the field was a risk the family couldn't afford. There was no time to chop, no time to prep, and no time to wait. When the family returned from the fields, starving and exhausted, grandmother didn't reach for a cookbook. She reached into a jar. The crack of a salted egg, perfectly cured and ready to eat. The sharp crunch of a pickled green. The rich, dark silk of a 5-spice sauce. These aren't just recipes, they are the original instant meals. Prepared months ago in the silence of the pantry, so they could be served today in under 10 minutes. Today, we're looking at the legendary pantry meals that prove you don't need a microwave to eat in a hurry. All you need is a stone jar and 2,000 years of grandmother's wisdom. If you want to recreate these ancient meals yourself, I've put together a full recipe guide with the exact steps and ingredients. You can find that at the link on your screen or down in the description. In the middle of the harvest, the work doesn't stop at the edge of the field. While the family cuts the grain, grandmother stays behind to dry, sort and protect the crop. In this season, time is the most precious thing they have. She has roughly 10 minutes to get a meal on the table before she has to return to her own work. She can only move this fast because the pantry did the hard labour months ago. The salt, the jars and the wind have been cooking this food in advance. She isn't starting a recipe. She is just assembling what is already ready. The sun is high and every minute counts. Let's start at dawn. If grandmother woke to a house full of hungry labourers, the first thing she did was check the millet pot. This is the gold standard for high-speed energy. Because millet grains are so small, they cook into porridge relatively quickly and break down into an easy-to-digest gruel. It's an efficient, fast carb for a culture that couldn't wait for a slow boil. The transformation is simple but precise. Boil tiny yellow seeds in water until a thin layer of oil rises to the surface. That oil forms a skin on top. Thin, precious. In many households, it was treated as the richest part of the pot. The nutty, mild flavour fills the kitchen. The golden porridge sits under that thin skin, proof that the first meal of the day is already waiting. Grandmothers often skim that surface layer for children and elders first, then ladled the rest to the workers. By the time the family dressed, breakfast was assembled. Not cooked, assembled. But millet alone doesn't wake up a tired body. For that, she reached into the brine jar. The brine jar sat in the corner, heavy with salt water and thyme. Inside, duck eggs had been sleeping for weeks, sometimes months. The transformation happens through osmosis. Salt moves through the shell, water moves out of the yolk. Over weeks, the yolk shrinks, hardens and concentrates. The lipids compress into a gritty, oily sphere of pure umami. Grandmother pulls an egg from the jar, one she boiled and cooled earlier in the week. Peel, slice. 30 seconds from the pantry to a bowl of steaming rice. The yolk is bright orange and grainy with the texture of damp sand. As she slices it, the natural oils seep out. That oil bleeds into the hot rice grains, turning plain starch into a rich, savoury meal in seconds. Historically, sailors carried salted eggs on long voyages. The salt acted as a natural preservative, keeping the egg fresh for months without refrigeration. No ice, no cooling, just salt and chemistry. The salting process draws out water and concentrates the egg's fat and protein, so each bite feels richer and more filling than a fresh egg of the same size. 1 egg, 1 bowl of rice. That's breakfast for a working adult, assembled faster than you can boil water for instant noodles today. The belly is warm, but the mouth needs waking up. For that, grandmother reached for something green and sharp. The vinegar jar held cloves that had turned an impossible colour. jade green, almost glowing. The transformation is a chemical reaction. Acetic acid from the vinegar meets sulfur compounds in the garlic. Over days, the cloves change colour. White becomes green. The texture stays crisp. The flavour sharpens. Grandmother cracks a green-tinted clove from the jar. In the heat of the harvest, this isn't just a snack, it's a sharp, acidic jolt that wakes up a tired mouth. The vinegar cuts through the heaviness of porridge and millet, and the garlic's bite makes plain grains taste like something worth eating. It's a 10-second appetite reset that keeps the crew from slowing down. Dawn is handled, but the family needs protein that doesn't require cooking. For that, she turns to the stone-weighted jar in the corner. The jar is heavy, not because of the liquid, because of the stone sitting on top, pressing down with patient, constant force. Inside, tofu has been transforming. Salt water draws moisture out. The stone presses it down. Over days, the soft curd becomes dense, firm, sliceable. Pressing tofu is a documented step in fermented tofu making. Water is slowly forced out before immersion in brine, reducing height and increasing density. Once packed in sufficiently salty brine, often with rice wine and spices, fermented tofu cubes can be stored sealed for months. Grandmother pulls a block from the stone-weighted jar. By using stone weights to force out the water weeks ago, Grandmother increased the nutrient density per cubic inch. This allows her to serve a lot of protein in just a few quick slices. No cooking, no frying, just high-density fuel for a family that doesn't have time to sit down. Properly brined tofu behaves almost like a plant-based jerky. Shelf-stable, portable, ready to eat by hand with no fire needed and minimal knife work. Just serve alongside the millet. Breakfast is complete in under 10 minutes. The family is fed. But the day is long and Grandmother knows the workers will return hungry before noon. Time to prepare the next wave. The workers are coming back from the fields. Hungry, they need calories, fast. Chinese sesame paste is made by toasting sesame seeds until aromatic, then grinding into a thick, oil-rich paste. It's shelf-stable at room temperature for weeks to months. No refrigeration, no preservatives. Just roasted seeds and their own oils. The transformation happens in the toasting. Heat releases the oils locked inside the seeds. Those oils bind the ground seeds into a thick, shelf-stable liquid velvet. Mixed with vinegar, soy sauce and a little hot water, it becomes an instant dressing for cooked noodles. High fat, high calorie. Energy boost without meat. The heavy, coating mouthfeel. The roasted, nutty scent. The noodles take longer to boil than the sauce takes to mix. Here's interesting part. We think instant noodles were invented in 1958 by Momofuku Ando. Packaged, dried, just add water. But sesame paste noodles were the original instant noodle, assembled in the time it takes water to boil. A spoon of roasted sesame paste loosened with vinegar, tossed over hot noodles. A full meal in under 3 minutes of active work. The original instant noodle. Mix paste, vinegar, and boiled noodles for a high-fat energy boost. But what if there's no time to boil noodles? What if the workers need food now? This is the liquid logistics of the pantry. When you have no time to knead, you use gravity. By dripping water into flour, Grandmother creates irregular pearls that cook in under 120 seconds. Why? Because the small, uneven shapes increase the surface area exposed to the boiling broth. It's a 2-minute starch solution that delivers the same calories as a 2-hour noodle prep. The transformation is gravity and speed. Drip water into flour. The flour clumps. Those clumps fall into boiling broth. They cook in minutes. Irregular, chewy, filling. The slippery texture of the dough pearls. The thickness of the starch-enriched broth. The starch leaches into the liquid, making it more filling than plain soup. We think good noodles require skill and time. Kneading, resting, rolling, pulling. Technique passed down through generations. But flour drop soup was made by people too busy to knead dough or pull noodles. Too busy to roll, too busy to rest. Water and flour collide above a pot and fall as chewy pearls into bubbling broth, filling enough to carry a worker through the afternoon. The soup is ready, but the workers also need something they can carry, something that doesn't need a bowl or spoon. Yesterday's dough sits in a covered bowl, slightly sour, slightly risen, alive. Old dough, lao mian, is a traditional pre-yeast leavening method in Chinese wheat cooking. A piece of yesterday's fermented dough is kept as a starter, giving acidity and aroma to the next batch. This practice effectively creates a continuous, self-renewing sourdough culture. The dough never dies. It just transforms. Yesterday becomes today. Today becomes tomorrow. The transformation is time and microbes. Wild yeast and bacteria ferment the dough. Starches break down. Acids develop. The dough becomes complex, tangy, alive. Grandmother takes a piece of that dough, rolls it flat, oils it, scatters scallions across the surface, rolls it again, flattens it, fries it in a hot pan. The shatter of the flaky oil-fried crust, the aroma of toasted green onion, the sour tang that tells you this dough has history. Chinese old dough starters were continuous cultures passed down through generations, some lasting decades, grandmother to mother to daughter. The same microbes, the same flavour, the same life. Yesterday's dough became today's emergency pancake, rolled flat, oiled, scattered with scallions, and fried into a shattering disc of sour fat and starch. Leftover dough from the morning was flattened and fried in minutes for a high-calorie afternoon snack. The pancake satisfies the stomach, but sometimes the body needs sweetness, something that feels like a reward. The jar in the cool corner smells faintly like flowers and wine. Niang is made by cooking glutinous rice, cooling it and mixing with yeast, jiuku. It ferments at warm temperatures for about a day or more, turning starch into glucose and light alcohol. The transformation is microbial. Yeast eats starch, produces sugar, produces alcohol. The rice softens. The grains become translucent. The liquid becomes sweet and slightly boozy. It can be stored in the refrigerator for 1 to 2 months. Eaten cold from the jar or warmed with water as a dessert soup, sometimes with glutinous rice balls. The floral, sweet scent, the tiny, softened grains that melt on the tongue, a faint warmth of alcohol that relaxes tired muscles. We think fermentation is complicated. Temperature control, sterile equipment, precise timing, something that requires expertise and expensive tools. But Niang ferments in a single day at room temperature, faster than bread rises, simpler than yogurt, just rice, yeast and thyme. She keeps a jar of rice that smells faintly like flowers and wine. On tired afternoons, she stirs a spoonful into hot water. Dessert appears, eaten cold from the jar or stirred into hot water for an instant dessert. Sweetness lifts the spirit. But the body also needs calm, especially when the day has been long and sleep feels far away. The dried goods sit in cloth bags. Lily bulbs, red dates, waiting. Dried lily bulbs and red dates, jujubes, are classic Chinese pantry items used in sweet soups. They are sun-dried and can be stored for long periods, then rehydrated to a crisp, tender texture. The transformation is water and heat. Dried petals absorb liquid. They swell, they soften. The texture returns, crisp, pear-like. The dates release their honey sweetness into the broth. Red dates are associated with blood-nourishing and calming effects in traditional Chinese medicine. Lily is associated with soothing and calming the spirit. A handful of dried petals and wrinkled red fruit simmer into a pale gold broth. The petal-like mouthfeel of the lily. The deep honey sweetness of the dates. Sweet enough to count as both dessert and sedative. We think comfort food requires fresh ingredients, ripe fruit, fresh vegetables, things picked that morning from the garden. But this soup was made entirely from dried goods that could survive a very long time in storage. A calming emergency meal for late nights, built from ingredients that waited quietly in the pantry. The afternoon passes, the sun drops, and now the real challenge begins, turning scraps and preserved proteins into an evening feast. The meat hangs from the rafters, dark, translucent, hard. This is meat that was prepared months ago. It will be used now during harvesting season. Lapyuk, Chinese cured pork belly, is traditionally made in cold, dry winter air. Salted meat is hung at around 10 to 13 degrees Celsius with good airflow, losing significant moisture and concentrating flavour. The transformation is wind and salt, using winter wind and salt to remove 40% of the meat's moisture, concentrating the flavours. The fat becomes translucent. The lean meat becomes hard. The entire piece shrinks, darkens, intensifies. Home recipes often dry for a week or more in cool weather, then store cured meat for months, refrigerated or frozen in modern practice. This is passive cooking engineering. Because the pork was wind cured and sliced paper thin, it has a massive surface area. Grandmother doesn't use a second fire or a wok. She lays the meat directly on the rice. The steam from the starch rehydrates the protein. She is stacking her energy use. 1 fire, 0 extra minutes of labour. The rice does all the work. No wok, no fire, just patience. Sliced paper thin and laid over rice. The steam from the rice cooks the meat in minutes. The meat is handled, but the meal needs vegetables. And during the harvest, there is no time to wander the garden for fresh pickings. In the heat of the work season, you don't go to the garden, you go to the jar. These are pressed green, mustard leaves salted and fermented under heavy stones months ago. They are a compact store of sour, salty vegetable. While fresh greens would wilt in the field heat in minutes, these fermented leaves stay crisp and acidic, offering much needed variety and nutrients when the garden isn't producing. The vegetables are covered, but the meal still needs depth. A flavour that transforms plain starch into something memorable. In the harvest rush, these are the ultimate shortcut. Grandmother takes the beans she dried in the sun and snaps them into segments, dropping them straight into the rice pot with the pork. No wok, no oil, no stirring. They rehydrate in the steam, acting like a biological sponge. A fresh vegetable has water inside and repels fat, but these dried beans are hungry. They soak up the pork fat dripping from the lapyuk above them. By the time the rice is done, the beans are tender, rich, and taste more intense than the day they were picked. The jar is old, the seal is tight. Inside, something dark and oily waits. Doubanjiang is called the soul of Sichuan cooking. A fermented broad bean and chili paste that evolved from ancient soybean fermentation practices thousands of years old. Modern Pixian Doubanjiang is typically fermented for months to over a year, developing deep umami and oily red chili richness. The transformation is thyme and microbes, a 12-month fermentation of broad beans and chili that creates a deep, blooming heat. The beans break down. The chilies darken, the oils rise, the flavour deepens. Historical origin stories emphasise accidental fermentation by travellers packing beans and chilies in haste. The beans spoiled, but they didn't rot, they transformed. 1 spoonful turned a bowl of plain hot water and noodles into a complex savoury soup. The thick, chunky texture, the dark red, oily sheen, a smell that fills the kitchen like a 100-year secret. Doubanjiang was precision engineered over months. Temperature, humidity, time, all managed, all intentional. 1 spoon into hot water and noodles. The kitchen smells like a traveller's spoiled beans reborn as the heart of the meal, the soul of Sichuan cooking. The main dishes are assembled, but grandmother knows the family needs variety. Different textures, different flavours, different experiences. The strip looks like leather, dark, wrinkled, hard. Salted and sun-dried radish strips are common across Chinese cuisines. Radish is heavily salted, pressed and dried until dark, wrinkled and intensely flavoured. The transformation is salt and sun-drying radishes until they shrink into dark, wrinkled strips of concentrated salt and sugar. The moisture leaves, the sugars concentrate, the umami intensifies. Minced salted radish is frequently stir-fried with egg, as a quick, intensely savoury dish often associated with frugality and peasant cooking. She takes a strip of what looks like leather, sun-shrunk radish, minces it into an egg. 2 minutes later, a poverty feast is on the table. The intense umami crunch, the dark fermented scent. What looks like leather tastes like treasure. We think poverty food is bland, that poor people ate poorly, that lack of money meant lack of flavour. But chai pa was so intensely flavoured that a tiny amount could season an entire meal. Minced and fried with an egg in 2 minutes. The ultimate poverty feast flavour. The evening meal is complete, but grandmother's work isn't done. She still needs to prepare for tomorrow and for the travellers who might arrive hungry. The strips hang like jerky. Dark, mahogany, chewy. Pressed tofu can be further dried and cured in brine seasoned with spices. Over time, it firms up and takes on intense savoury and spiced flavours, analogous to a plant-based jerky. The transformation is spice and air, infusing soy curds with star anise and cinnamon, then air drying them until they have the texture of beef jerky. The moisture leaves, the spices penetrate, the texture becomes chewy. Dense, properly cured tofu in sealed brine can last months and is eaten in small slices as a condiment or snack with congee or rice. She hands the children strips of spiced tofu. No bowl, no chopsticks, just teeth and chew. Protein delivered in seconds. The chew, texture, the dark mahogany colour from the spice bath. A shelf-stable protein that could be eaten by hand with no cooking required. Thin as a matchstick, chewy as jerky. We think plant protein is a modern invention, impossible burgers, Beyond Meat, lab-grown alternatives. But 5-spice tofu strips were the original meat substitute, designed for Buddhist monks and travellers alike. Shelf-stable, portable, satisfying despite being plant-based. The evening winds down, but grandmother has one more task, preparing the quick foods that require no cooking at all. The seaweed is dry, brittle, dull. Toasting dried seaweed briefly over flame is standard for reviving aroma and crispness. This releases oils and improves flavour. The transformation is fire and seconds. Briefly passing dried river seaweed over a flame to release its oceanic oils. The seaweed crackles, the colour brightens, the aroma blooms. Rice balls wrapped in seaweed as handheld travel food. The seaweed barrier keeps rice from sticking to hands and protects from drying out. With a few passes over the flame, the Zicai crackles to life, then hugs a fist of rice into a traveller's ration. No bowl, no chopsticks. Just hands and hunger. The snap of the dry leaf versus the soft, moist rice. A handheld meal designed for travellers. The seaweed kept the rice from sticking to the hands. We think seaweed-wrapped rice is Japanese, onigiri, sushi, modern convenience store food, but Chinese coastal traders and river workers used Zicai wrapped rice balls for centuries. A solution born from the same need: portable food that doesn't stick to your hands. The daytime work is finished and the core pantry staples have kept the family moving. But for the travellers arriving after dark and the late night emergencies, Grandmother reaches for the final, deepest layers of her jars. These are the solutions for when the fire is out and time has completely run out. The sugar looks like silk, thousands of strands, hair thin. Dragon's beard candy is a traditional Chinese hand-pulled malt sugar confection stretched into thousands of fine strands, often likened to silk. The transformation is stretching and air, stretching fermented malt sugar until it breaks into thousands of hair-thin strands. Each pull doubles the strands. 8 pulls create 256 strands. 16 pulls create over 65,000. The sugar, once made and kept dry in containers, is essentially concentrated carbohydrate and can be nibbled as quick energy. She pinches off a wad of sugar silk. It vanishes on the tongue, but hits the bloodstream like a match to kindling. Energy delivered in seconds. The way the sugar silk dissolves instantly on the tongue. A high glucose emergency energy source kept in airtight tins. We think energy foods are modern: gels, bars, sports drinks, engineered for athletes and soldiers. But dragonbeard candy is essentially concentrated sugar and nuts. It behaves a lot like an old-school energy boost, a high-calorie bite you can carry and eat in seconds. The travellers are equipped, but Grandmother's final task is the most important: preparing for tomorrow. The brick is dark, dense, hard. Tea compressed into bricks has a long history in China as a portable, tradable form. Bricks could be shaved into hot water for instant tea. The transformation is compression and time, compressing tea leaves, dried ginger and honey into a solid block. The pressure binds them. The honey preserves them. The result is shelf-stable for years. While specific ginger honey tea bricks are more of a modern specialty variation, combining dried ginger and compressed tea for warming drinks aligns with traditional Chinese ideas of combating internal cold. A shard from a dark brick, scalded with water, becomes a 10-second energy shot. The ginger adds warming spice, while the tea and honey provide a gentle lift from caffeine and sugar. Exactly the kind of drink people reached for on cold, demanding days. Shave off a corner, add hot water. An instant morale and energy booster for a long day of labour. We think instant drinks are modern convenience. Tea bags, instant coffee, single-serve packets. But tea bricks were the original just add water solution. Portable, shelf-stable, ready in seconds. And with that, the day ends where it began. At the pantry. The soy milk is hot, fresh, plain. Boiling fresh soy milk and curdling it with an acid, vinegar, brine produces instant soft curds similar to tofu brain, duhua. Flavouring with dried shrimp, seaweed or pickles is common. The transformation is acid and heat. Boiling fresh soy milk and breaking it with vinegar to create instant soft curds. The proteins coagulate. The curds form. The liquid separates. This makes a high-protein spoonable soup in minutes, especially if soy milk is already prepared. She breaks the hot soy milk with a splash of vinegar. In less time than boiling noodles, clouds of curd drift in a savoury broth. The day's final meal, assembled from scraps. The fluffy, cloud-like texture of the curds. The savoury additions of dried shrimp and seaweed. High-protein liquid silk that utilised pantry scraps for flavour. We think tofu making is complex. Moulds, pressing, hours of work. Something that requires equipment and expertise. But broken soy milk soup was instant tofu. Curds formed in the bowl, not the mould. A 10-minute broken soy milk soup. And as the family sleeps, grandmother saves a piece of dough for tomorrow's starter, checks her jars, rotates her crocks. The pantry is a living machine, and tomorrow it will feed them again. We call ourselves the instant generation. We have microwaves, delivery apps, freeze-dried everything. We think convenience is a modern invention. But ancient Chinese grandmothers solved the same problem centuries ago, with salt, thyme, and stone jars. These weren't recipes, they were systems, front-loaded labour that paid dividends in emergencies. The pantry wasn't storage, it was a machine that worked while grandmother slept. Every jar, every crock, every hanging rack was technology, just slower than we're used to seeing. Salt drew water from eggs and meat. Microbes transformed beans and rice. Wind cured pork hanging from rafters. Stone pressed tofu into density. Thyme turned fresh into preserved. Perishable into permanent. The next time you feel like you don't have enough hours in the day, remember this. Ancient Chinese grandmothers didn't have 5 minutes because they were lucky. They had 5 minutes because they were engineers of time. They realized that the pantry could be a pre-processing plant. By letting salt and microbes do the cooking months in advance, they freed up their hands to build a civilization. They weren't just surviving, they were optimizing. If this changed how you think about instant food, leave a comment with which meal you'd want to try first. Subscribe if you want to see more ancient food wisdom. And share this with someone who thinks convenience is a modern invention. The pantry is still waiting. The question is, what would you keep in yours?